Let's talk about the South African budget. It's a massive multi-trillion rand affair. But today, we're not going to get lost in the big picture. Nope, we're going to zoom way in on one specific 7 billion rand slice and ask a question that really gets to the heart of how this money is being spent. Okay, so first, let's just get some perspective. Every single year, the South African government collects over 2.1 trillion rand in taxes. I mean, that's an almost unimaginable amount of money. It's the financial engine that powers the entire country. With all that cash flowing in, it's pretty easy to lose track of it all, right? But what if I told you a pretty significant chunk is spent on things that, well, they might just surprise you? That's what we're about to dig into, and it raises some really important questions. All right, let's dive right in. We are going to look at just one slice of that massive 2.1 trillion rand pie. And we're not talking about defense or housing or education. We're talking about the budget for administration. And that slice, it's worth 7.13 billion rand. That's the amount planned for the 2025/26 budget cycle. Just let that number sink in for a second. 7.13 billion. And just so we are absolutely crystal clear on this is not money for building schools or fixing hospitals. These are public funds that the government plans to spend just to run itself. You know, the cost of keeping the lights on, the cars running, and the meetings catered. So the big question is, where exactly does all that money go? Well, these aren't some secret figures. They're right there in the public record. So let's walk through it together and break it down. Okay, now take a look at this. This gives us the full picture all in one go. You can see all the major categories that add up to that R7.13 billion total. It's a lot to take in, I know. So let's zoom in on some of the biggest pieces of the pie. So the single biggest expense by a long shot is travel and subsistence. It's coming in at a staggering 3.82 billion rand. That's for officials moving around, their hotels, and daily allowances. Then you've got communication, phones, data, you name it. That costs R891 million. Fleet services for cars and fuel is another R838 million. And then we have nearly 700 million each for venues and for consumables, like stationery. But let's get even more specific, because buried in this budget is 198 million rand set aside just for catering at departmental activities. We're talking food and drinks at government functions. And right next to that, we find this little gem, almost 10 million rand. And what's it for? It's specifically for entertainment. Entertainment for government officials. So we have the numbers, we see the line items, but what do they really mean? To understand the true impact, we have to look beyond the spreadsheets and see how this spending stacks up against the reality on the ground for so many South Africans. Now, here's another number for you. 40%. That is the youth unemployment rate in South Africa. We're talking millions of young, qualified, and willing people sitting at home, just waiting for an opportunity. And this is where the story gets really, really sharp. You put them side by side. On one side, hundreds of millions planned for catering and entertainment. And on the other, an entire generation facing a 40% unemployment crisis. Now, we're not drawing a direct causal link here, but we are asking you to just look at the contrast. And this brings us to the most crucial point of this whole explainer. This isn't just about the amount of money being spent. It's about what that spending says about a government's priorities. Are the funds actually aligned with the most urgent needs of the people? So let's just ask the question that's been hanging in the air this whole time. Looking at these numbers, does this kind of spending really reflect a government that is truly for the people? The answer to that question says a whole lot about the country's priorities. Because here's the thing, it's a fundamental principle, right? When a government is genuinely for the people, its budget, its spending, will naturally reflect the people's most pressing needs. The numbers themselves will tell the story of what truly matters. So you tell me, does our 3.82 billion on government travel reflect the priorities of citizens who are facing a public transport crisis every single day? Does spending R891 million on internal communication reflect the priorities of millions of people who don't even have reliable internet access? We hear a lot of talk, a lot of rhetoric about service delivery, about putting people first. The question this data forces us to ask is a simple one. Does the spending actually match the rhetoric? So we've looked at the numbers, we've examined the context, and now I want to leave you not with an easy answer, but with one final, challenging thought to really mull over. When you look at 7 billion rand in administrative spending in a country where youth unemployment just will not budge, you have to ask yourself, is this the budget of a government that is urgently trying to fix the country's problems, or is it the budget of a government that has simply become comfortable? It's something to think about.